One, it worked. Good morning. No, afternoon. Good afternoon. And welcome back. Who knew we'd have season 2? But here we are. And today's our first session, and we're going to be going till May 3rd. And this year, we're trying to focus on speakers each month regarding social action in our community and different ways that we as Temple Sinai support or get involved with social action here in Northern Nevada. So today is our first session, and we'll be talking about the importance of learning. We want to thank Jewish Nevada for being a sponsor, as well as our Temple Sinai Board of Directors for supporting this program. And today we have our Sinai School Director, Josie Glassberg. And Josie is a Midwest transplant, and she has a background in both Jewish and Montessori education. She's passionate about helping children to discover their personal path and communal place within Judaism. And Josie is currently in graduate school to be a therapist and spends her free time hanging out with her 13-year-old daughter, Coco, and their orange cat, Mittens. And joining Rabbi Ben today is Michael Cohen, who's an educator here at our Sinai School. Michael moved to Reno in 2021 and quickly became active at Temple Sinai, joining the board and teaching in Sinai School. He has taught the 6th to 7th grade class for 3 years and finds great joy in connecting with his students. Michael was born in Israel and raised in New Zealand. He came to the U.S. for graduate school. His family spans the full spectrum of Jewish practice, and he believes that Jewish is what as Jewish does. And welcoming them today is Rabbi Benjamin Zober, who's back from his sabbatical. Welcome back, Rabbi Ben.
Thank you.
And we'll have a conversation and then open it up to Q&A, and then hope you'll stay for some light refreshments. So welcome.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you. Thank you, Josie and Michael, for joining me here and being willing to do this, since I refused to tell you what we were going to be talking about, aside from your lives and education. But I wanted to start just a little different. Jill reminded me that as we're in a synagogue and I'm a rabbi, I should inject some Judaism into this. So as education is and learning is kind of our theme of the day, she thought, and I agreed, that it would be appropriate to start with our blessing for study to kind of set a tone for us. So feel free to join in if you know this one, and if not, just say amen at the end and you get full credit for the prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who has commanded us regarding the mitzvah of busying ourselves with study. So our traditional start, and I'll start the way we usually do, is to say that I met you at Sinai. What first brought you to Sinai? If we could start with you, Josie. Feel free to please grab the microphone so the people in the back can hear you, and tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so I came here about around the time when my daughter's best friend Sophie was getting excited about her bat mitzvah. So my daughter was we're Jewish, but I grew up culturally Jewish. I never went to synagogue or had a bat mitzvah or anything like that. And so I realized that if my daughter was going to connect to her roots, then we needed a community. And so I started coming here, and Coco started at Sinai School, and then I kind of got roped in along with that. So yeah, that's how I came here.
Okay. Michael, same question.
Well, we came to live in Reno about 4 years ago. We moved from the Bay Area in the middle of the pandemic. We were looking for a space that was more room for the kids to to go out and do things. A lot of things recommend Nevada, especially Reno area over the Bay Area. And we literally did a search of, we want to leave here. I have a good confidence that I can take my job remote. Where are the places in the country we would like to live, or we would consider living? So it was pretty wide open. And then I just remember that a friend of mine suggested, why don't you look into Reno? And there's a whole story about how this all happened. But the short version is, this is a wonderful place to live. There's like a whole 20-minute spiel here that I'm cutting. But it's a, we basically did like a national pageant for like internally in our family for like places we wanted to consider moving to. And Reno is also very close to my wife's family, who are in the Sacramento area. So it was about the same distance on the other side. That was a big part of it, is not going too far. And when we started looking at here, we were trying to figure out where, what would the Jewish community be like? Because in the Bay Area, there's a lot of synagogues, and you can just sort of join in and show up, and everything pretty much ticks along. And one of the things I realized was, if we were going to move to a town like Reno, we were going to have to be much, much more involved. Because here, one of the things I like to say is that in Reno, every Jew has to be a load-bearing Jew, because it's a small town. And so I sort of dug back into my past, because I grew up at the other Temple Sinai, the Temple Sinai in Wellington, New Zealand. That's where I had my bar mitzvah. And it's a fun fact, but I'm not the only person at this Temple Sinai who also has connections to that Temple Sinai. There is one other family here that has direct connections. In fact, they're still members of the other Temple Sinai. And I'll leave it as an exercise to the viewer to figure out who it is if you don't already know. But when I grew up in Temple Sinai, Wellington, it was a similar thing. It was a sort of a working shul, a shul where things worked because there were people who put in a lot of effort. And there weren't that many people who just sort of showed up and didn't do much of anything. It was a community that really, it was at or near the critical mass that if you drop below, you really went into problems. And so I knew that, okay, it would be one of the things that I would have to do. And here I am, doing more every year.
So I wonder, Josie alluded to it a little bit, and we haven't gotten from you, Michael. How is it that you came to be our on the religious school director and teachers? How did that? Because it was certainly, I know that was not something that Josie was thinking was going to happen. And
Your
I know
wife
that
bullied me, and I bullied Josie. I mean, that's the short version, but
such a good message for all the kids out there who are watching.
Well, Rabbi Sarah, it was very gentle bullying. It was more like, hey, so there's sort of a missing space here, and I realized that I could, I knew the material. I didn't know how to teach. I had no idea what it would be like to teach, but I figured I knew the material, and I'd figure the rest out on my own. And, right.
Yeah. And then for me, there was the space, and Michael actually pulled me aside and to see if I would like to step in as the director. I think I had been volunteering a bit, and yeah.
So Josie had basically just shown up, and I had no idea that she had a background in education, but there was some volunteer thing that was going on, and she was like, "Yeah, I'll do the thing." And I think it was about food. It was Hanukkah stuff. Yeah, she just sort of volunteered to take over some of the Hanukkah stuff, and I thought, huh. And we had just parted ways with our previous director. Hadn't worked out, and I thought, I just had a little hunch, and so I sat down and said, "Hey, so would you be interested in?"
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think I said, yes, but do you know, like, how do you think I'm qualified? Like, I am, but why do you think I am? So anyway, then it was nice because Rabbi Sarah, she's very good at building systems, and she's built a lot of infrastructure for the program, and as did the previous director Haley, and so it was a nice baseline to come in. But I feel like I have been learning a couple steps ahead of the kids. And just because I don't have the background that a lot of other people here do. I also think that that can be a good perspective because we are kind of the catch-all synagogue here, where we have a lot of families that don't come from religious backgrounds, or there's interfaith families, and so that's been nice to just kind of think ahead to what families and parents need in terms of like getting people on board with different things that the kids are learning in Sinai School around the holidays. So I've been trying to make a pretty big effort to have parallel education going on with the parents, not just with the kids. So they're getting lots of emails this year with things they can do at home. So yeah.
There's that sort of reminds me of something interesting. Something that my father passed away recently in May this year, and all sorts of things that he has said over the years kind of popped into my head. And one of them that I come back to again and again is that children can smell hypocrisy on you, right? They have a nose for it. The only way to get a child to take something seriously is to be seen taking it seriously yourself. And so when I thought about teaching in that context, I thought, well, this will teach my children about my values, not by telling them what my values are, but by showing them what my values are. And when I think a lot about the kids that we have in these in the classes, there are a lot of parents who are here because they know something's missing in their lives. They know some piece is needed, and they feel that piece is here, and they don't really understand it. They have very little Jewish knowledge. They just feel a hole, and they try to fill it. And sometimes they do it with by just sort of dropping the kid off at 9:30 and picking them up at 12:30, and that's better than nothing. But you can really tell the difference between the ones who have something Jewish at home and the ones who, to add to what we do, and the ones who don't. There's an enormous gap that can only be filled by the parents. And so it's really good that you're trying to bring the parents on board. It's a huge part of education.
Yeah, I will say I certainly grew up in a space where the parents, if they were kind, they would slow the car down to let the kid get out of a religious school. If not, we learned to roll, and then they would come back reeking of donuts and Starbucks, and it was hard to hard to take that they couldn't so much as darken the door of the place, but wanted us to be there and wanted the teachers there to make us Jewish. So I absolutely appreciate that there's an attempt to change that culture here, because it not only is it more effective, but I would like to think that we all believe that there's something to it. That there's a reason we are subjecting our kids to all of these things.
Sometimes I feel like we're the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, but it's better than if there wasn't one. No.
This is why you are such an excellent
really.
7 teacher, because that sort of humor does not work with the kindergartners.
Oh, it's not. I don't. So this is for the parents, but it's people who have. There's a saying that in these days, if you know Aleph, if your friend knows Aleph and you know Bet, teach him Bet, right? It's that if you know 2 things and your friend knows 1 thing, teach them the 1 thing that you know that your friend doesn't know, right? If you don't need to know all of the things in order to be qualified to teach, you just need to know 1 more thing than the kids do. And I wish it weren't the case, but that's not hard.
Yeah. I also think there's something to be said about I don't know, your analogy of the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. This idea that like we're here to just provide this very like base urgent service. And I think in a way, when you have a lot of families that aren't coming from, or some that aren't coming from a religious background, I think that you have people dropping off and you have people wanting their kids to come to school here. And what you're saying, Michael, is they don't quite know why, right? They don't quite know why. I think that's true. And I also think that there's a part that knows that there's something here that they're getting that you're not getting if you don't have a religious framework, and whether that has to do with your actual beliefs in in God, or whether it's the community or the rituals. Everybody has something that they that means something to them, so that they're coming here, they're making their meaning. And I think a lot of parents, including my own, who just wanted us to choose whatever we wanted, right? So we're culturally Jewish, but they say, choose what you want. And that's a really hard, and I think steep ask for kids sometimes, or for kids that grow up to be adults, because they don't really have anything to reconcile with. Do you know what I mean by that? They don't have anything to say, these are beliefs or a community that I grew up with, and I want to keep doing this, or there's some parts of it that I want to do things differently. When you don't have anything at all, it's so wide open that I think it's hard to know what to do. And so that's something that I've kind of experienced myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add something to that, because that really it strikes a chord in me. I've never been a fan of this approach, of the let the child choose approach. When you give your child a choice, you're essentially telling that child that you don't care which option they choose within the set of choices that you give them. Do you want mac and cheese or pizza for dinner? Do you want this or that? Do you want to be do you want to celebrate Hanukkah or Christmas? When you give your kid the free choice, you're telling them that you don't care, that it's either way is good with you. And I think maybe you don't intend to say that to the child. I think that's what the child hears. And so I've never liked that approach, and I don't parent like that. I say, this is who we are, this is what we do. When you are older, you will have the opportunity to redefine that for yourself. But right now, this is who we are and this is what we do. Yeah.
And they can get lots of examples of other people in their community that they see as role models, like, oh, I can be a Jew this way or a Jew this way. There's like many ways to be that.
Yeah, I think what we do here in this community, the simple existence of this community is fundamentally countercultural in this country, right? America, much of the American cultural landscape is built on the idea of atomized individuals making free choices, and that unlocks an enormous amount of creativity and power, but it also alienates and locks people away from each other. I think when we choose to join a community, we choose to partially subordinate ourselves within a structure like this. When we listen to a rabbi who has an opinion that might differ from ours, and we force ourselves to consider that rabbi's opinion, rather than, we see a lot of folks who will take the position that if the community that they're in disagrees with them, then they'll go find another community that agrees with them, right? The challenge in being in community is not, it's not in when you agree with that community, it's what you do when you disagree. How you hold yourselves to the discipline of remaining in a community with people that you don't agree with on everything. And I think that's a profoundly countercultural choice. And it's one that I think offers a great deal of emotional stability if done right. And that's what I want for my children. And so I have to demonstrate it to them. And that's why I'm here.
We're certainly glad for it. So something that I've sort of been thinking about, and a lot of what you've both sort of shared speaks to that, is that for a long time, particularly in the Reform movement of the liberal Jewish world, religious education was somewhat without structure. A religious school would have a handful of parents who had some amount of Jewish knowledge, teaching classes, and there wasn't really any cohesive plan or an overarching curriculum or any sort of pedagogy, which led to all sorts of problems. I remember learning about Genesis every year, at least the first half of Genesis, every year for 5 or 6 years of my education. Certainly didn't get into any of the really challenging or subversive pieces. And there was, depending on which community someone is in, they would learn different sorts of things. And the two of you bring sort of a different thing that Josie, as you said, you grew up culturally Jewish, but you bring a very, very strong and definite educational background, and that you're able to offer sound teaching and learning and strategies in a way that are not necessarily available in other ways. And Michael, you don't have an educational background, but you have a very strong Jewish background, and I think that has allowed the both of you to offer some countercultural things, that we're not wedded to Jews teach it this way, or the Reform movement says you must offer the following things, and at the same time you're saying, well, wait a minute, I want to share this in my way, and I know you've brought some very different things into the classrooms, and I wonder if you could sort of talk about those experiences of bringing your expertise and your passions in, particularly where it is brought in a way that was not something that we, or maybe even Judaism as a whole, had seen before.
Yeah. I think for me, I was starting with like the Montessori background and just the systems that I know within that. I think looking at each of the grade levels developmentally too has been important, and we start off really structured in K3, and then we get a little bit more freedom and responsibility as we go up to when you get to Michael's class, and we have a lot of freedom for the kids. And then the 8th graders, which is a program that started this year, where they pretty much just run class. So it's been I will say a challenge to figure out what does this mean for a school that's just once a week. We're not here with the kids every day, and so this idea in Montessori of normalizing the classroom, where it usually takes about a month, here it takes longer, because we have the kids for just once a week, and then when they come in, a lot of times they still think of this as a weekend, and so there's some just different expectations that we kind of push hard at the beginning of the school year. So and we had the privilege of having a wonderful K3 teacher last year, Ben, who had a child in class, and he came with his 5th grade classroom experience, and he was able to really help to infuse a lot of ritual and routine into especially our younger grades. So that's something that we really focus on here. And I feel confident bringing that side of it, the routine, the ritual, the classroom management, support and help for the teachers, but then the Judaism side of it, I've been learning as I go. So.
Right. Yeah. My approach to 6th and 7th grade is completely different.
As it should be.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of run, I didn't expect that I would have this, but I've actually developed a very clear thesis, like internal thesis. I'm going to try and put it into words for you guys, but I haven't really put it into words for myself.
If only someone had told you to prepare in advance, you could have something well articulated.
Right. Well, so the defining trait of 6th and 7th graders is maturity and matriculation, right? At the end of the 7th grade, they don't have to come back. There is no structure for them anymore. And so my driving impulse is to create intrinsic reward structures around Judaism so that when they finish their 7th grade and they finish their bar mitzvah, they see themselves as people who have a right to walk these halls independently. And I think you can see some of that in this 8th grade program that we have. We have kids choosing to stick around and do things. And there's a couple of pieces that go into that are really important. So the first is the idea of developing the voice, right? I want my 6th and 7th graders to talk back to me constantly, right? The fundamental Jewish experience is an experience of asking questions and trying to create answers. And the thing that I want to avoid most of all is the silent child, right? I want every kid to have opinions. Sometimes those opinions are loud. Sometimes those opinions are even in their body, right? We're going to study the Holocaust again this year. I'm expecting a lot of like physical opinion when they struggle with the anguish of these sorts of questions. But I run the classroom. I focus more on Judaics than I do on Hebrew, and one of the reasons for that is that they're getting their bar mitzvah training much of the time as well, which is doing a lot of Hebrew practice. But what I'm trying to do is to develop their internal Jewish voice, right? So this year we're doing a lot of history. I have a much more structured curriculum than the other classes. I have 1 year of history and Holocaust and 1 year of, let's call it traditional Judaics. And we're in the history and Holocaust one this year. And I pretty much have my lessons planned out for the entire year. So it's very structured, but inside each lesson it is deeply unstructured. So for example, today we were talking about the golden age of Spain, and we spent a lot of time on questions like, what is a golden age? How does a golden age end? Why does it end? Right? Why do states make war on one another? Right? Really basic questions of history and our place in it, because these kids don't know anything about history, but they do have pretty strong opinions about the world around them at this point. And I want to link those things together, weave them together. So developing the voice is a big part of it. Another big part of it is developing the idea that the world does not necessarily look the same from the vantage point that you have as from other people's vantage points, either in place or in time. Because when you look at 4th and 5th graders, they aren't yet really able to step outside of themselves, in my experience, right? We all look out of the world through a pair of eyes, right? And that's the fundamental experience of being human. But as you get older, you start to think about, well, what does the world look like through different pairs of eyes? And I really want to bring that out. So we're always in conversation. And I think that's the most fun. This wasn't what I expected. I expected not to end up with a style like that, but it's really joyful. This year I have my own kid in my class, and she listens to me in my class in ways that she would never listen to me anywhere else. So it's the big leagues for me these 2 years.
Can I add to that?
Please.
I think you were talking about viewing the world through different eyes, especially when you get older, and I think largely from a curriculum standpoint, right? Yeah, and I do want to mention that from like a developmental standpoint, when we're this is Michael's son, Ami. So when you're in K3, it's like this guy. It's very, very straightforward. So you're not doing a whole lot of perspective taking. Like what does it feel like from this other person's point of view? All of that kind of has to be guided by the teacher, and so there's a whole lot of repetition around that during classroom time, which our lovely teacher here, Laura, K3, she and the Madrahim, the 8th graders who are her teaching assistants, spend a lot of their time just reminding the kids, just going over classroom behaviors and rituals that they've done before to be able to kind of train that perspective taking. And then once you get into 4 and 5, you're learning you're learning to do that more yourself, and then once you're in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, you become much more accustomed to that, and you've kind of graduated into more of like an identity lens. So it's like about other people, but you really are kind of focused on like, well, how do I fit into this? How do I fit into the larger picture? So, yeah.
Well, so this is this is what it's all about. But I think a lot of this is sort of the big picture, right? And I think it's fair to say that what we have here is not your grandparents' religious school, whether it's because we have much stronger religious or educational fundamentals, and that we also have deeply outside ideas coming in to kind of bring those in. I mean, it's almost completely indistinguishable from the religious school I went to, and I wonder if you could give us some sort of sense of how this looks. Like, Michael, I know you've sort of gamified some things and brought some things, but just at all levels, what distinguishes this for what in terms of the student's experience? How does it look? What sorts of things are happening that are being used to educate them in ways that maybe those of us who went to religious school or in probably, I would say, in any sort of religious tradition, it looked a lot different than what we have now.
Do you know what our biggest competition is as a religious school?
Depends on the time of year. I know in the winter it's usually skiing.
Soccer. It's soccer. The biggest competition for children having a Jewish identity is sports. In other words, we live in a society where your cultural and communal and religious identity has, in the broader population, a roughly equivalent level of importance with the balls you kick around on a field for the average family, which is deeply sad, I think. But what it means is that you have to make it fun, right? You do not have a claim on these kids because the parents aren't the parents who raised us, or maybe people. When I say us, I mean like people in their 40s, but probably also people in their 50s and certainly older. You showed up to religious school, or you got a hiding, right? It was not viewed as optional. It was not viewed as an extracurricular. It was viewed very centrally. The teachers in those eras had a claim on those children, which allowed them to not think too much about whether the children were developing a Jewish identity, but rather they were focused on making sure the children learned curriculum. But the result of that is a generation of people who forgot what they knew as soon as they left the classroom because they didn't know why they knew it or why it mattered. And they never really developed a Jewish identity. And obviously, I'm speaking extremely broadly here. One of the things, when I first showed up, Rabbi Sarah said to me, the most important thing that the kids get in our school is positive experiences with other Jewish kids, right? Positive Jewish experiences with other Jewish kids to build a sense of communal identity. And then the second most important thing that they get is positive Jewish experiences within a Jewish adult who is not their parent or their rabbi, right? So that they can form these horizontal connections within the community, not just vertical connections to the rabbi. And then the third thing they get is curriculum, but that's a distant third, because the model is that if you raise a child who has a Jewish identity, they can always learn more later. But if you raise a child who has learned something but has no Jewish identity, you've lost them, possibly for the entire generation, possibly all their descendants, depending. I mean, obviously, Josie, you're an example of someone who came back to it, so maybe not all the descendants, but still, the key point is that the result is a tasting menu, not a forced meal, right? I make everything that I do, my key point is like, how am I engaging their interest, be it through gamification, be it through, taking an interest in bits of history. One of the things I taught my kids was, like, why did civilization begin in places like the Fertile Crescent? We spent a bunch of time talking about how humans were a river people before irrigation was invented. What's that got to do with Judaism? I don't know, probably not much. But what does it do is it weaves a tapestry of ideas about the past that makes them feel like they're on the shores of a much bigger ocean, right? I want them to feel like they're wading in, and that they can see just how much more there is out there if only they take an interest in it later.
That's lovely. Yeah, and Rabbi Sarah said that same thing to me that stuck with me. Jewish experiences with other Jewish kids, and I think that so we don't just have Michael here, and Laura's here too. Tova is our 4-5 teacher, so I just want to recognize all the teachers are here today. And then Jeremy was my sub for part of today too, so he was 8th grade teacher today.
The whole team, I love it.
I know. But just to give, you asked, what does it kind of look like? I can kind of walk through what that might look like by class just a little bit, and what that Jewish identity maybe shows up at different age levels. So with K3, we're doing a lot of songs. We're doing a lot of rituals together. We're doing blessings with each class now before snack, and then they're doing a lot of alphabet stuff. So we're doing Judaic stories, and the kids are learning their Jewish identity in terms of learning something that's completely foreign to them, like learning a completely new alphabet that doesn't have the same characters, that look completely different. And so teaching that is a challenge in and of itself. And so we're not doing anything like decoding in K3. We're doing more just recognition, and learning how to write these, to write the letters. And then they might get a little bit of through osmosis, like reading through like the environmental print that's in the classroom, right? So, and then in 4-5, the Jewish identity is deepened as they are learning a lot more about like the holidays. They're learning about something that's completely new to them, which is we have a whole different kind of calendar. So they're not just calibrating to like the new language that they were in K3, but also there's a new time scale. And what does that mean? And what does that feel like? And, it's connected to the moon. And Tova also started off the year by asking the kids if they had Hebrew names. And so finding their identity within, we have other names too. So, and some some people don't have these names yet. So they're finding different ways to connect them to concepts they haven't heard of and to identity, like identity markers that they hadn't considered for themselves before. And it's exciting to them when they see other kids who are participating in it too. So it really is just as much about being around the kids in their class as it is learning, this specific thing on this specific day. And then Michael, you talked about sixth and seventh. In eighth grade, we're doing a program which is kind of the equivalent of a youth group. So the seventh graders who have just had their bat mitzvah, in an attempt to keep them involved, we put them with their friends. It has to be social. It has to be kind of led by them. So our program is focused around a mitzvah project that they do. So a service that they do with somebody, a mentor here in the temple. And this year, those range everywhere from being a madrahim or being madracha for K3 to helping to come up with a babysitting service for high holy days. We have somebody helping out with the oneg. So they're taking on that responsibility. They're also planning a Shabbat dinner once a month and a social outing that we rely on parents to take the kids to these things, of course, and to help host. But the kids are in charge of planning everything. So that's been something where as they get bigger and bigger, they get more responsibility and they can kind of decide how they want to be in their Jewish identity, but still be here. So
we have, I want to leave time for questions. So I want to have one last question for the both of you. There's an old adage that the teacher is the most important learner in the room. And I wonder if you could each share something, not necessarily the most significant or most interesting, but something that you have learned from your students or your experience and as part of the team here.
There's a couple of things I think that I've learned. The first is how to spin connections, right? Because I'm trying to give my students a taste of the weave and weft underneath their lives, because most of the time at this age, you're primed to want to understand why, but you don't yet have the skills to understand the answers to the questions. You ask a lot of questions, but you struggle with the explanation. So trying to give them a taste, trying to figure out how I would mentally model these things, because as adults we have a much more complex mental structure for why things happen the way they happen, and it's been a challenge for me to try to bring down the principles to something that will stick. That's been taking a lot of practice. The other thing is it's been a revelation figuring out how to live in a world where a whole bunch of eyes are pointing at me, which isn't the world that I lived in before, right? I don't think it's a coincidence. My career has done really interesting things since I started teaching. Yeah. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it has to do with my increasing comfort with all the eyes pointing at me and my ability to reach different people where they are simultaneously, which is something that I've developed as a teacher I never had before.
Wonderful.
that's really hard to develop. But yeah, there's a steep learning curve for that. Yeah, I think for me, just as I'll just speak from my role as a director more than a teacher here. I think that for me, it's been important for me to figure out like what kind of what kind of support do the teachers need from year to year, and I think that one thing that is, and it's been different, it's been different each year. We've had a couple different rotations of teachers, and one thing that I've realized is that there's a real challenge with the classroom management side of it, because we're just getting the kids for one day a week. And so it's been really important to be able to connect with families and to get them on board with changes that need to happen. So that's, I would say, one of the ways that I'm trying to learn and trying to kind of like stay ahead of it is, how do we work with families? How do we front load things so that we're not getting to the point where we're having behavior problems in the middle of the year and they haven't been addressed, like trying to address them early and often as they come. So that's been something that I've been listening as a teacher.
Thank you. So we have a little time left, and Jill will come around with the microphone. Please, if you have a question, raise your hand. Please only speak if you have the microphone so that everyone can hear you, unless you're muttering under your breath, in which case, please don't do that in the mic.
Thank you for the presentation. How did you both deal with the attack on Israel from October 7th? How did you discuss that, or did you, with the children, and how did they respond to that?
So, well, I mean, I can only speak to that because one of the reasons that I came here, it was because of that myself. I was not actually the director when that happened, but that was one of the things that I don't know, kind of put a light on in my brain of, things are going to be different, and if I don't know who I am in this community, my daughter's not either. And I think that I wanted her to learn about who she was within a community that could talk about that and contextualize it in a way that maybe you're not getting on the outside. So I can't speak to what the classrooms did during that time because I wasn't the director. Subsequently, yeah. So that's something that is talked about, I think, in your class. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's not something we do a whole lot of focus on with the younger grades, but it's something that I think at the level of 6, 7 and up, that's something that we address then. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a fairly long answer to the question, but it has to start with the understanding of how little these children, even at the 6th, 7th grade, how little they know about anything to do with Jewish history. Last year, when I did a 3 or 4 lesson unit on the history of the modern state of Israel. These are children who've never heard of the Oslo Accords. They don't know anything about the political structure of Israel. Some of them fail to find Israel on a map the first time you ask them. Right? It is almost impossible to generate any kind of understanding of the current political situation, and it takes 5, 6, 7 lessons to get them to the point, right, where they understand issues like competing claims to land. They don't read the news. They don't talk about these things at home. They don't have any context. And if you don't have any context, then the only thing that you can say that will stick is because, the equivalent of because they hate our freedoms, right? So I spend a fair amount of time trying to build that contextual structure for them through an understanding of the history of the last, let's say, 100 years. A lot of the struggle is that these kids, they ask questions that they do not have the capacity to understand the answers. They will ask questions with their bodies. They will ask things like, why do they hate us? Right? And they want to know the answer, but actually what they really want to do is voice the anguish. Even at the 6th, 7th grade, right? I had a 7th grader just today who asked some version of that question. And since I know this student, I sort of went up to him and said, do you want the explanation or are you just upset? And the student knew enough to say, I'm really just upset right now. Being in a space where they can be upset about these things, in a place where the adults are going to validate that they're upset, without trying to offer something that is as simple as because they hate us, is really important. And so the answers to these questions, they take double-digit lessons, right? To build anything close to nuance, right? We're going to do the Holocaust the second half of this year, right? We're going to be tackling anti-Semitism in a really tricky way. One of the things that I started doing is I start every Holocaust lesson with a candle lighting, right? We have some pictures of kids and their little stories, and the students will light a candle, right? It's in the body. It's not in the head. You talk to a 15, 16, 17-year-old, it starts to be more in the head. I wish it were easier to do this.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think that when you're I mean there's so many Jewish holidays that are memorials, and I think that there are different levels of understanding that kids will have for that. So if you're in the younger grades, like we can do something small like lighting a candle or singing a song, but to really be able to like understand that nuance, like it like pedagogically, it doesn't make sense to go into it until like 6th and 7th grade. David Sobel, an amazing educator, he said the adage, no tragedies before 4th grade. Well, there can be tragedies, but you're just not going to understand a lot around it. You can light a candle and you can say this is what we do, but there's not going to be that level of understanding until they can talk about it. And I think a lot of that has to do with respect for the child and respect for where they're at too. So we don't want to introduce things at that level of detail too early.
One of the experiences that I've had regularly in the last few years is to bring a lesson at a level of complexity that is too high for the students, where I start myself down a path and then I sort of have to rein myself in because I'm thinking, oh, actually, what I'm talking about is suitable for a 14 or 15-year-old. And what I have here are 11, 12-year-olds, right? I naturally assume that kids can do more than they're doing currently, but there's a lot of things that I would want to do. It's basically like, imagine if you've got a series of islands which are actually part of an underwater mountain chain, right? And your job as an educator is to bring the water level down so that people can see the connections between them. But there's only so much you can do, and sometimes I want to structure a lesson around this really important connection, right, between this set of islands and this set of islands. There's a clear underwater connection, and I realize as I'm trying it, I just can't bring the water level down enough, right? They're just not there. If I had a 14, 15-year-old class, I would do it completely differently. But these are kids who won't remember the Oslo Accords from one week to the next, right? You'll teach them about the Oslo Accords, and then you'll come back next week and say, does anyone remember the name of the process that we talked about last week? And like 2 out of 6 will remember what that was.
I have a question. Why is it only one day a week?
Because that's all the parents are willing to do. And if you look at conservative shuls, you'll see that some schools have like a 2-day-a-week program, Wednesdays and Sundays. But remember, our biggest competition is sports extracurriculars. There's only so much time the parents are willing to devote. If there were more time, then we'd of course have to face the question of where are we going to find the teachers. But ultimately, it's as expansive as the parents want it to be.
No.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
No, one of the things that I'd like to say is I'm really impressed with the difference between both of you and your approach. And I do understand it, and it's greatly appreciated. And the fact that you wake up every Sunday and come here and work with our children, I think that's absolutely fantastic. One of the things that I find, and looking back at my Jewish education 70 years ago, is there is a lack of teaching of Jewish heroes. And I'm not referring to biblical heroes. Who in this area are heroes? Who can we relate to? And I think that's equally as important to teach something that you can relate to. What are Jewish places in this community other than the synagogues and the cemetery? Are there Jewish places that they can drive by and see every day? It's just my opinion.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think that we're living in a city that is not like very overtly Jewish. And so I think that the Jewish heroes, I kind of think of a lot of them as the people who are in the congregation and the people that the kids see when they come on Friday and when they come here on Sunday. So that's something that we've tried to build those connections with for various like field trips that we have and people that come in to teach, and then also with the mentorship program. But gosh, I would just love to do more with that. I think that you're absolutely right. For kids to be able to be driving by somewhere, that they go by every day and know what the Jewish connection is. I wish I knew more places like that. I think that I would be like open to hearing more from other people about who we can talk to and who, building out like a map of what that looks like, because I don't fully know what that looks like.
So my version of this is actually the opposite. I think that one of the hardest things about teaching is to remember what children are like. Children are much more focused on the area in their direct proximity than they are on the area in their distant proximity. You're going to get a lot more Jewish identity out of having a play date with another Jewish kid than you are about telling them, this is my personal opinion, than you are about telling them about places in the community that have Jewish connection. This is the kind of thing that people in their 20s and 30s and 40s are interested in. In my opinion, I think that kids just can't see far enough to understand the relevance of such things. We do talk about more modern Jewish heroes, but we do it, at least in my class, we do it still through a sort of a web of fable, right? One of the person I spend a lot of time on is Mordechai Anilowitz, the leader of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, right? You want a Jewish hero, there's a Jewish hero. But what I don't talk about in terms of Jewish heroes is like people in the community. The kids' experience of people in the community should be visceral, not intellectual, right? They're gonna get more out of a hug from Judy Schumer than they are going to out of a lecture sponsored by Judy Schumer. If you know, and I use you as an example simply because you run the Holocaust thing, right? Once you get to 14, 15, 16, 17, right? These are kids who might come to a talk and take something away from it. But at the 8, 9, 10, they remembering a hug, remembering a kindness, remembering when they got a snack, a tasty. When they get an ice cream social in the synagogue, it's the best thing ever, right? You just got to. This is how children at this age are, at least in my experience.
Well, and to be fair, Judy does the Torah for Tots and the lecture.
There we go.
So
right.
She it's like
Torah for Tots.
the entire breadth of education.
Right. For
one
Jewish children,
educator.
Torah for Tots probably does a lot more than Holocaust stuff. The Holocaust lectures system, the series that you run, is much more effective for adult education. Right. Oh, you encourage me to bring the 6th and 7th graders every other year when we're studying the Holocaust, and I do encourage that, but they'll mostly end up fiddling with their phones, is the honest truth.
Tova,
Hi.
please.
Tova here, I'm the 4-5 teacher and of course president of the temple. While I certainly do agree that our chief competition is secular activities, gymnastics, soccer, band. I absolutely think that those just time shares are our biggest competition to Jewish education. I'm going to start this question a touch anecdotally. We have a lot of children in our school who are from mixed faith families. And I think we always try to be respectful to that and deferential to that. And I think our curriculum, like I know I'm using the high curriculum, and it reminds me to not beat the drum too loudly on us being the chosen people, because we don't want to disrespect or send a kid home with something conflicted that then they might have to unpack and have a hard conversation with their parents about. But conversely, when I get to interact with kids, or even our own kids from the mixed faith families, their Christian education seems incredibly forward and incredibly direct. There are students in my class who if asked what their connection to Judaism is, they say, well, it's my mom makes me come here, and it's the religion that Jesus was. You laugh, but it's absolutely true. I mean, we definitely, I have kids in my class who I believe they're here and they enjoy their time and they're with their friends, but we're still working on asking them to identify as a Jew. That's definitely something that's the purpose of the 4-5 curriculum. So I think that's one thing that as we frame these questions, I want everyone to understand about these kids is that they do not yet, it's not guaranteed that they see themselves as Jewish. But so anecdotally, the Christian education they get can be very direct, and that messaging is reinforced a lot. I know my stepsister has said of her own little girl when she was a little girl, that little girl is certain of 2 things in this world: that Jesus loves her and that Santa Claus is real. And we were scolded to not disrupt either of those frameworks for her. So the question that I want to give to our director and our most senior teacher in this class, and the rabbi perhaps, is how do we feel about our balance and our deference and our respect and consideration that we have for mixed faith families? And is it helping us by not making any waves, or are we losing the opportunity to be more forthright with our messaging?
Yeah, I think what you were saying about the message that some kids get with a Christian background education is it's very direct, and it can be even dogmatic sometimes. These are the things that are true, right? It is a one-way broadcast, and I think that a really fundamental part of being a Jew is that Jews disagree. Like looking at any text that we have, there are so many interpretations of it. And I think that's something that they start learning really, really early, is whatever concept we're learning, there are several ways to look at it. We're talking about everything from the story of Noah, to how we celebrate different holidays, to how we are, why do we observe these rituals in this way? Do you think, what is your opinion on that? And so fostering a space where debate is really encouraged, I think, is one way that we respect the kids, and that we can make sure that it's not just like a one-way communication. And as far as interfaith families go, I think that you're probably seeing less kids coming home with a message about like a moral lesson than a discussion about what they had in class, what they talked about, and how they agree with it or disagree with it. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of interfaith families that are feeling threatened. So that would be my answer.
I think there are two different kinds of interfaith families. There's the one where it's a war, and there's the one where no one cares. I've always struggled with this problem. The way I try and teach the kids three things. The first is that they're Jews. The second is that they belong here, and the third is that they have a voice here. And you'll find that in many Christian sort of religious school models, that third one is missing, right? You are a Christian, you belong here, but you do not have a voice here, right? No one's really interested in your opinion. Now in 6 and 7, I'm very interested in their opinion. I guess it's easier for me than in other classes, lower classes, where the opinion is more about what are we having for snack than what does it mean to be a Jew. But more broadly, I have always felt that part of my job is to be an advocate. And I don't mean being an advocate verbally. I mean being an advocate in every way but verbally, right? For the Jewish experience and the Jewish life. I want the kids to go home to their interfaith families thinking, I'm a Jew and this is important. It's an important fact about me. It's not just something I put on a census form. When you're dealing with with interfaith families which don't have strong opinions, that's pretty straightforward, right? There's a Jewish person who doesn't think their Judaism is super important, married a Christian person who doesn't think their Christianity is super important. They want to let the kids choose. I understand that, and my job there is to be an advocate, right? Without appearing to be an advocate, right? Just to lead by example. In the interfaith families where it's more of a war zone, and I've run across a couple of those, the child is put in a situation where they are de facto forced to choose, right? They're not going to make both their parents happy. And maybe it was an ill-considered match. Maybe it was something that wasn't important to the parents at the time, but became important later. There are a lot of situations like that. And there, I think the important thing is for the child to see that one of their identities attempts to exclude the other forcefully. This is something I've seen in at least one of my students, right? I'm not gonna say which student it is, but this is a student who has said, my one side of the family says horrible anti-Semitic things, and my other side of the family is here at Temple. What should I do? It's heartbreaking. But there, I think the point is to instill pride, to say, this is who you are. It doesn't lessen anything else about you. But you have a home here, you have a voice here. I think we are too differential. In the short answer to your question, Tove, is I think we are too differential. I think in the world that we live in, our job is to portray a point of view, and not to hammer it verbally, but to be it, right? To be a point of view, because children are looking or a mental model of how to see themselves in the world. And every time they look around, they see people who don't have a lot of conviction because those people are not telling them, this is what you should be, this is what you are. And without excluding, right, just trying to stand tall in our point of view, I think is important.
So I think we have time for one more question. I see Judy has the microphone, please.
Jewish heroes. When Rabbi Bear was here and my 2 grandchildren were in the Sinai School, I did a program for 4 years called the Jewish Chautauqua. And I went into the, I think it was 5th, 6th, 7th grades, and told them stories of some Jewish heroes starting in November, because Purim takes place in February. And the idea was that Purim morning, that when we celebrate Purim, all the children in the religious school and all the parents would come and see the 5th, 6th, and 7th graders doing a Jewish hero. And I gave them whole lists, and they came up to the front, and there was Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and there was Sandy Koufax, and there was Barbara Streisand, and there was Hank Greenberg, and they wore the costume. And if you're familiar with Chautauqua, Chautauqua is done in the first person. So there you had the little girl who was Ruth Bader Ginsburg and told her story in the first person. And it was great. And we did it Purim morning. And then, of course, we had the use of the facility in the afternoon. And fortunately and unfortunately, I also ran the Purim Carnival. And the men's club did the food. Do you remember the men's club who did the food for the Purim Carnival? And we had all the games that are still upstairs in the loft that I see periodically. And I did that for 4 years. My grandchildren finished religious school. Nobody wanted to take over, so that kind of faded. But there were Jewish heroes, and there were lots and lots of Jewish heroes to pick from. And it was great.
Well, you'll be glad to know we did our year during the pandemic. We had this very similar sort of program. The kids dressed up and presented, and it was indeed just tremendous. Yes. So we had.
Can I add something there? I think there's a meta narrative underneath what you just said, which is that children are hardwired to try and figure out how to make grown-ups happy. And when a grown-up is particularly passionate about an aspect of education, whether it be this or that Jewish heroes or anything else, when that grown-up can portray genuine interest and genuine involvement, they pull the children along with them. I think there's an implied question in what you just said, which is like, why aren't we doing this now? And no, it's totally fair, 100%. And I think the answer is, it's not what's in the curriculum. It's what the teacher brings in their enthusiasm and personal attachment, right? I would suggest that the strongest part of that curriculum, the thing that made it work, was your, Judy's, deep personal enthusiasm for the subject. And that it's on every teacher to figure out what element of the thing they have their own personal deep enthusiasm for. The thing that gets me up in the morning is understanding the undercurrents of history. And so I put all sorts of questions and ideas into the history curriculum. Today we talked about the Red Queen effect in interstate anarchy systems. We didn't talk about it directly, but it sort of got in there. And the point is that the response that the child, I think, takes away at the end is not learning about interstate anarchy, and it's not learning about Jewish heroes. It's feeling like there was something worthwhile that just happened there, that keeps them warm. And so whatever it is you choose to teach, as long as you can send that child home feeling warm, feeling heard, feeling interested, feeling loved, then you've done your job.
We do have one question online, so
Wonderful.
we'll do that as our last question. So
Yeah.
I want to include them, obviously. So this is from Steph Ayton.
Oh, hi, Steph.
I'd like to know how, if at all, you handle special education in different developmental patterns that may be related to disability.
Yeah, that's a good question. We have some students that have some learning difficulties and some behavioral difficulties, and so that has been, at least in my time here, working a lot with the parents and seeing what they already have in place. So this is not the only place that if you have a child that has some sort of a learning or behavioral difficulty, it's not just showing up here. It's they're aware of it, and it's something that is being accommodated for elsewhere. So we want to know how that's being accommodated for. So yeah, it's working with parents and seeing what else they have going on. Do you have any specific?
So this is something I do struggle with. I put in an average of 2 to 3 hours worth of prep per week. I can't construct a lesson that caters to all the levels of knowledge and skill that show up in my class. I just can't do it. I don't have the time. I don't have frankly, the training. And we don't have enough children to split them up effectively. This is one of those things where I'm just doing the best I can. I have students with a wide range of skills. And I try, if I focus only on the ones who, setting aside even disability, just like how much Hebrew do they bring into the class with them, right? I've got wide ranges, and it's a challenge every single day. Teaching to the middle is like the basic starting point. Trying to extend out to both sides, I struggle with this. It's hard.
Different solutions. Like last year, you guys. Last year, we had to break up 4, 5, and 6, 7 into different Hebrew learning levels. So they were learning Hebrew according to their proficiency instead of what grade level they were in, because that was the need at the time. So just being responsive in that way. And, we're lucky enough to have Rabbi Sarah as a resource for that. She ended up being one of the Hebrew teachers because we had that need. So, yeah, that's an example.
Yeah, if I can add to that, it's, as Michael said, it's very hard in a school, in a community this small. We don't have necessarily the resources or the space or time. But at the same time, something that we do have that is very much an asset is an understanding that there are different types of learners. That I've been in spaces where there is one modality. There is one way that every student in the class is expected to learn. And it's full speed ahead. And some kids get dragged behind the boat, and some kids are fine. And it's not great. But the understanding that isn't a reality, that isn't fair to really anyone in the classroom, goes a long way, because it opens up the idea that we can then try to work with the students. We can try to work with their parents. We can work with the teachers to give them tools to help everyone in whatever way they can. And yeah, sometimes we're just not able, and it's unfortunate. And we all, I think, take that very personally when we can't teach everyone as much as we can. But we are constantly working to figure out how to do that for each student, because in the end, we all learn differently. We all teach differently. And it's something that we continue to work on. And and always hope that more people if people are passionate about it and people have understandings of different sorts of learning or different sorts of students, that they will come to us and offer their expertise, whether as teachers or maybe just sitting down and saying, hey, this is something that I would have liked when I was a student. And if you have someone who comes to you with the same sort of things, this is something that might help them.
One of the kids in my class broke a collarbone. Now, this might sound crazy, but actually, this was a kid that we're not talking about special ed, but we are talking about different modalities of learning. This was a kid who struggled to keep still. They heard every single thing I said. They understood what they participated. They might be rolling around on the floor, but when I asked a question, they knew the answer because they were paying attention. They wouldn't sit still, but they were paying attention. And one time, this child was rolling around in a particular way and fell off something. And when they came back from winter break, they told me that actually that fall had fractured their collarbone. They were fine, thank you, it's okay. Nobody had realized it at the time. But to the point of different modalities, kids will absorb all sorts of things, even if they're facing away from you. Nobody has to, it depends on, if the kid is not being disruptive, in my class at least, if the kid is not being disruptive, if they're doodling, if they're paying attention, but they're fidgeting, or they're rolling around, it's okay, right? I've managed to connect with children who are rolling around on the ground, children who are don't even look at you because they're constantly, doodling on something, but they hear you. You can tell because they will answer your questions. There are a wide range of modalities, and I do my best to cater for as many as I can.
I think, we sometimes think of 6-7 as a special case too with that, because like you were saying before, it is what you bring to it, Michael, and I don't think that we can kind of apply that across the board. That they are rolling around and they're hearing you, but that is because that is kind of like your teaching style in your class, which the kids love and they appreciate, but maybe wouldn't work as well for our younger grades.
I think there at 6th and 7th grade, I've been blessed with kids who've been able to they can tell what the difference is between like self-stimming but focusing and self-stimming and being completely off the map, right? A kid who's rolling around in K-3 probably isn't paying attention or hearing you, right? But a kid who's rolling around in 6th and 7 might be absorbing every single word. They just like to roll around while they think.
Well, before I turn it back over to Jill, I want to thank you both for coming in and for sharing all of this with us. I want to thank everyone who came out, and of course everyone who had a question, because I think this is really, education is so important. And I'm so glad that there are so many people in our community, both in the classroom and out of the classroom, who are passionate about it and excited about it. And I think we're all better off for it. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Before we close, I just wanted to give a quick personal comment. I grew up with a conservative Jewish education in New York City. My identity was through my family and my community. I was very fortunate with that. And my community was my synagogue because everyone who lived in my community went to the same synagogue. So in that sense, I was very fortunate. But you had me reflecting on my education, and we would call it Hebrew school back in the day. And I started to try to remember my teachers. I can only remember one. And because we're on social media, I won't say his last name, but I can tell you I remember his black pants, his white shirt, his tzitzis hanging from his talit, and his kippah, and he had a stopwatch. And what I remember about Hebrew school is him walking up and down the aisles of the desks, counting the timing for how quickly we could read the Shema. And this is my memory of all of my teachers. And I wish I could remember the others. And the reason I bring it up is because having heard you today, knowing our other teachers, Laura, Tova, our rabbi, I think our students will grow up with memories other than a stopwatch. And I have friends who I know through the interfaith community, and they'll ask me if I can converse in Hebrew. And I go, I can read the book, I can read every word, but I cannot have a conversation because that was not the priority in the late 1950s, early 1960s. So I'm very appreciative of what everyone here is trying to do. And hopefully these children, these young adults will grow up with memories where 50 years, 60 years later, they can go, oh yeah, I remember, what was his name? Oh, Cohen something, wasn't it? And he taught us something about history and not just the stopwatch. So thank you.
The generations of prior Jewish education have a lot to answer for, in my opinion.
Well, I'm not going to, that's another Sunday. So with that, I really want to thank Josie, Michael, Rabbi Ben, and all of you for coming out. October 12th, our topic will be taking social action. And our speaker, our guest will be our very own president, Tova McGilvray, who's been one of the chairs of our social action committee. November 2nd, we'll be doing welcoming the stranger and immigration. And Jeff and Jane Gingold, who have been instrumental in projects here through the synagogue that some of you may be aware of or will be introduced to. I don't want to give the spoiler alert. They'll be speaking with Rabbi Ben November 2nd on that. And then I won't start to repeat all of the next ones, but we'll have December, January, and so forth. And so I hope you can join us and spread the word about it. One last thing, October 26th, Jason Harris, who is a podcaster that does a program called Jew Ought to Know, will be here same time that Sunday. And we're looking forward to welcoming him from Northern California. Thanks to Jeff Gingold, we were able to have him come in, and with the support of Jewish Nevada and our board, he'll be here for the afternoon. If you go to our website, you can see 2 podcasts that Jeff has recommended we listen to give you a better understanding about Jason. So it's October 12th with Tova, October 26th with Jason Harris, and then again, November 2nd, we'll be here with Jeff and Jane about immigration and welcoming the stranger, which is very appropriate to our Thanksgiving season. So light refreshments, please, and thank you so much for joining us today. And Michael Gordon, thank you for welcoming in our Zoom world. Okay.